Okay. All right. Are we good? I think we're good to go. Yep, Tammy's nodding. So if Tammy nods, we're good to go. Good morning, everybody, and happy Monday. My name's Carolyn Watson. I live here in Bellingham, and I am a health and wellness educator. I'm a licensed acupuncturist, and I have a master's degree in biomechanics and another one in education. And I like to teach people really just fun coping strategies for their body. And I feel like right now we all need as many of those as we can. So today we're going to talk a little bit about feet and ankles, which is just one of my favorite topics because we have these parts and they're readily accessible to our eyes and our hands. But I think most of us don't really appreciate all the interesting things they do besides just curious about the world. So we'll start just with a little bit of neurological background. So your whole body has different nerve ratios. So I'll talk about motor nerves. So there's different types of nerves in your body. There's nerves that tell your muscles to move. So there's also nerves that give sensory information back to the brain and the spinal cord. So we've got a lot of different types, and there's more than that, but we're going to talk about those two types of nerves right now. So the types of nerves that go from your brain and spinal cord down to muscles and say, go, and then the nerve pathways that take information from those muscles and tendons and body parts and bring them back to the brain and spinal cord and say, hey, here's what's going on. So it's really interesting about feet is that their ratios of nerves to part is very high. So for instance, if we take our hands, so hands have the highest density of nerve endings in the body. So your hands are exquisitely good receptors, so they can take in a lot of information, but then they can do really cool things like play musical instruments and draw tiny little pieces of things and make crafts and, squeeze lemons and do really complex tasks. And the reason they can do that is because there is a very high amount of nerves per fiber. So, and I often say this backwards. I'm going to try to say it clearly. And my coffee's down on the floor. And if I get the math wrong, I'm going to have to start drinking more of it. But the idea is if one nerve is connected to, let's say, one muscle fiber, then that nerve can tell the muscle fiber what to do. And if another nerve is connected to another muscle fiber, it might say, I want you to do it just a tiny bit different. And then another nerve is connected to another fiber. And if they have these unique connections, their communication can be really nuanced and you can do some pretty cool things. So like if you just take your quadricep, like your thigh muscle, one nerve might go to 200 different muscle fibers. And that means your quad can't paint anything. Your thigh, while it can climb and can do pretty exciting big motions, it's not going to paint a picture. But your fingers can get that really exciting nuanced movement because of these ratios where one fiber connects to one nerve. And it's not always one-to-one, and making that part up to simplify things, but it's not 1 to 200. It's 1 to a very small amount. So the cool thing is that your feet do that too. So your feet also have these relationships where one fiber is going to connect to one nerve in a small compact way. So there's nuanced movement. And I think we've probably all seen some of those cool videos where people start painting and cooking with their feet if they lose their hand operation. Well, that's why that's possible, is because they're similarly innervated. So your hands are really like 2 feet. And if we think of dogs, and their 4 legs, and horses and other animals, 4 extremities often go together. So we're kind of wired like that, where our hands are cool, just like our feet. Our feet are cool, just like our hands. So that's important. And it's important because it means that your feet can learn tricks. And I'm a big proponent of fun, which is why Tammy and I are great friends, but then also like just keeping your body parts stimulated and your brain stimulated, and just doing something simple with your feet, like practicing to pick up your big toe without picking up any other toes. That lights up your brain. It actually helps your balance. It helps prevent bunions. So you should try it. Like where you're sitting at home, see, can you pick up your big toe and not the other toes? You probably can't, but if you practice, in a couple of weeks, you'll be good at it. And once you master the big toe up and down, you can try to move your big toe in and out, and then you can do the wave and pick up your big toe, and then the second, third, fourth, and fifth. So I don't think I'm technologically savvy enough to get the camera down to my feet, but we can figure that out. And I think you guys can follow along and get that. So that's an important part. Also, you know, I don't know if I can monitor the chat. I think I can. If you guys have questions, yeah, put them in the chat box and I'll try to multitask a little bit and talk and look at chat. Or Tammy or our technologically sound people can blurt out the questions if I miss them. So the first thing that we really get out of this is that your feet can do complex movement and you want to ask them to do something, not necessarily to paint a picture or learn to play the piano, but if they can learn to move toes independently, if you can do just different exercises, there's a million of them. You can just YouTube foot exercises, they're all good, but your feet want some stimulation, they want some activities, which gets us to the really cool part. So I just got back from camping, and one of the things that I did while I was camping is I spent a lot of time barefoot on rocks. So in past camping trips, I've put on my water sandals and I've made a very conscious decision to, you know, not subject my feet to hard rocks. But there's some really cool just research and case studies that show that walking on not necessarily painful surfaces, but on varied stimulated surfaces, like basically rocks, it feeds into the brain really well. So this gets into this idea that there's these sensory nerves in our feet and they're sending all this information into the brain and the spinal cord. So some doctors who specialize in back pain wondered if people would experience a decrease in back pain if they started rocking on pebbled mats. And so thus was born a whole intervention. And then of course, yoga mats with bumps on them, because instead of just going out and walking in a river, you know, humans being humans took a yoga mat and put fake rocks on them and then walked on that. But we found that their pain went down, and it went down because the brain's idea of what was happening changed. So the medical conditions in the body didn't change, but the brain's perception of what the pain level was went way down. So I found this to be really interesting, just in my own body, how spending time on those bumpy rocks, trying hard not to fall, working on balance, really did feel good. And I got used to it, and I actually started to crave it. And I woke up this morning and, you know, I'm looking at my smooth floors going, oh, I miss the river for many reasons. So that's kind of one of these other little take-home pieces. You know, that your feet want stimulation. So they want activity and exercise, but they also, they want to feel something so they can send that information back up to the brain and say, oh, by the way, we have some input. And for reasons we don't fully understand, that input changes your sense of pain, kind of takes it down, can improve your balance, can improve your well-being, probably lots of other things we haven't studied too. So those are like two kind of nerdy fun things, is one, your feet can do tricks, and two, if you go walk on some rocks or anything that has texture, you know, it doesn't, you can get really creative with this. Rocks are just super helpful. And if you're kind of artsy crafty, you know, you can go get some rocks and you can glue them on your own old yoga mat or piece of cardboard, and you can make your own very fancy, you know, therapy tool, and not buy one. Please don't buy one. The internet will sell you these, but we can have a craft project if we need, but nobody should buy rocks glued to anything. That's a fun game. So like right now, questions, you guys, it's always such an interesting experience teaching or talking on Zoom, because, you know, we can't see the room and I have no idea if any of this makes any sense or is even the least bit interesting. You can make faces too. I can see a few of them. So, and I'm looking at the chat. I see nothing in there. So that kind of gets us into this next piece about, you know, what can go wrong with feet. Okay, so we're talking first about what can go right with feet. Well, you can give them tricks to do, which will stimulate the muscles and keep them mobile and agile and help your balance. And then also we, you know, can get out on rocks and unstable surfaces and potentially decrease the way we experience pain in our body just by increasing this feedback loop through the feet. So the next piece of it is, you know, like, what are some things that go wrong with the feet, and what could we do about those? Because, you know, prevention's great, but sometimes also we're kind of headed down a path of problems. So one of those problems is bunions. We hear a lot about bunions, and there's different degrees of bunions. And sometimes a bunion is so far advanced that there's not a lot you can do to address it besides surgery. Other times, it's kind of like you're on the path. The bone hasn't really remodeled, or maybe it has, but your foot still has quite a bit of flexibility. So this is, again, where it's very hard for me to do this. Next time I'm going to set up the camera on my feet. But there's this wonderful trick with a broccoli rubber band. So can you guys picture if you're in the produce aisle and there's broccoli and cauliflower and such, and they have these big thick rubber bands that often hold two bunches together to make one? They're really good rubber bands. And I think sometimes the only reason I buy vegetables is because I like the rubber band on them and I save them. And I try to eat the vegetables too, because no one should waste it. But when you're at the store, if you have a choice between the broccoli with the twist tie and the broccoli with the rubber band, you want to pick the one with the rubber band, because that rubber band, they're hard to find and they're wonderful. So they're thick. And what you can do to help work on your big toes is pretend my thumbs are big toes. If you loop your band around your big toes, you can stretch your toes out away from your body. So actually, I guess it would be this way. We'd be stretching them this way. So if your toes are coming in like this and you're having bunion issues, you can stretch them with the band, and you just wrap it around both of them. And you do it gently. You never want to hurt. And then once you're getting used to stretching, you can actually work and pull your toe back towards the foot. So you stretch it out with the band, and then you pull with resistance back in. So that's a fun way to get the muscles associated with the big toe that can sometimes be shut down a little bit if you have a bunion developing, right? You never want to push into pain, but it can be helpful to work for that. Okay, what to do for sore heels and tendon? Oh, so I have one of those. I actually had a tear in my Achilles tendon right down by the heel. And it's been quite a learning process to understand a little bit more how to fix that. And I got it from doing too many stupid things without warming up, and probably eating enough good food, and getting older. But there's a lot of ways we find ourselves in these predicaments. So when we talk about the heel, it kind of depends on where your heel hurts. All right. So if your heel hurts, like here, we'll cover up the Starbucks logo. So let's just pretend that this is a heel. Okay. And we've got the undersurface of the heel and you've got the back of the heel. So this is where your calf and your Achilles tendon comes down. Here's your bottom of your heel. And then we've got the arch kind of where my hand is. Okay, if you're talking down here, this area, there's usually a couple different reasons things hurt down here. Sometimes there's a bone spur. And if there is a bone spur, honestly, it usually isn't what's causing the pain. The bone spur is there because the area called the plantar fascia, which is going to be kind of this area, is a little bit too tight. And so sometimes getting massage and icing. So icing all around the front part of the heel to get the inflammation down, and then rolling with a soft ball, your arch can be really, really helpful. So you're thinking more about your arch needing to have some massage, and you don't want to massage right where it hurts on the heel because that'll actually make it worse. So that's the inflamed part. So then if we go, I just have to get back on I was looking at the chat window and then I screwed up my coffee cup analogy. Okay, so then if we're going up the tendon, right? So we're going up this part of the heel. This area is where we get what's called insertional Achilles tendonitis, or there's a bursa back there. You can get bursitis too. And that area really wants you to get stronger. Okay, so what you do for that, there's many things, and it can be a great idea to go see a physical therapist or a podiatrist and get some ideas. But something that usually never goes wrong and often can help is to do calf raises. Okay, so this is important though, because they're a little different than how most people do them. You go and you find a stair or maybe a phone book, although I've fallen off phone books. They slide. Phone books can lead you to another injury. The stairs are good because you can hold on to the rail. So you're going to lower your heel, not lower than the stair. You're going to lift your heel up, and then you're going to go down to just about the stair level and then come right back up. So you're not going to drop way, way down because it's going to hurt too much. So you start just by going just down and then back up. And then as you get stronger, you go down a little bit further and then up a little bit further as the weeks progress. And then eventually you go to one leg. So you start with two legs and then you go to one leg. And what I had to do when I was injured is I had to start and go one leg down, two legs up. So one leg down, two legs up. So first two legs down, two legs up, and then 2 legs down. I said it backwards, 1 leg down, 2 up. So you get the idea. And then eventually 1 leg down, 1 up. Okay, and I think we have another question. The big toe rubber band stretch. Are you attempting to move the big toes only away from each other and towards the other toes on the respective toes? Yeah, so you're trying, it's a great question. And this is where I feel like I need a video production team to help me with my stuff here. So the big toes, they're moving both directions. They're moving towards each other with the assistance of the band. So, you know, if you keep your toes far enough apart that the band pulls them towards each other, that's where you get the stretch. Then you can choose to work by trying to pull one back towards its buddy toes, right? So the stretch is the big toes coming towards each other. And then we get the big toe joining its friends on the same foot. That's the exercise. And most people are horrible at that exercise, and it takes weeks, if not months, to get good at it. Once when I was teaching a class at Western, I gave the students extra credit if they could, at the end of the class, be able to move their big toe back towards the other toes without touching them. And about half the class figured it out, but it took them all quarter. Yeah, it is hard. Bonnie's right. It's hard. It's not easy, but it's a really worthy pursuit, especially in a pandemic, you know, and we could all circulate back again with our best toe tricks at some point. So Morton's neuroma and irritation. So Stephen's asking about that. So Morton's neuroma is, those are tricky. So they're tricky because rolling and putting pressure on them. So what they are is essentially a growth in the nerve. It's not a malignant growth. It's just a growth. And it's like an enlargement, I guess is the best way to look at it. And the problem is if you put pressure on them, it often feels worse, right? Because the nerve's inflamed or the nerve is enlarged, so pushing on it more doesn't feel so good. So what helps is, interestingly enough, this rubber band exercise. So often where the neuroma goes is pinched because the other muscles are so tight around the foot. So getting the rest of the foot a little bit more flexible and dynamic can sometimes offload the neuroma. A lot of people have to have surgery for them and they have them removed, but in terms of like trying to stay non-surgical for it, I found that that big toe exercise is great. And then you can add other toes to it. You can put the band around the first and second toe and try to move that way too. So for Morton's neuroma, you do the big toe piece with your big toe and your second toe in, and then do the same thing. And it's hard. So you do maybe a set just with the big toe and then another one as well. I think we have just a few more minutes because I think I always forget. Tammy, tell me how long I'm going. See, she already told me and I already forgot. You can type it in.
So we will wrap it up by quarter till. And I really like the coffee cup heel analogy, Carolyn.
Wasn't that great? And
that was great. You don't need a foot.
We don't need a foot. We need a Starbucks cup. Gosh. Yes. Well, or any cup. It doesn't have to be Starbucks. It can be anything. Okay. So Susan's asking about walking shoes. So walking shoes really are about what your foot needs to be happy. And if you have a foot like mine, like I have a really high arch. So my best walking shoes have a ton of arch support, and I have a really wide toe base. Like my toes are wide, so I need all this room in the front. And I need a really narrow heel because I have a tiny heel, and then a really high arch. So my walking shoes have to be really specific to me. And if somebody else wore my shoes, they might hate them because if they have a wider heel and smaller toes or less arch, it would actually make them feel worse. So just know that's one of the reasons that it can be so helpful to just have somebody else go look at your feet. So I love all of our local shops for this. They're all good. Like any place that has an actual human who will put a shoe on your foot and look at it, and Bellingham is great. So definitely it's useful to have somebody there who knows all the different types of shoes and can help you with that. Now, that being said, the next piece, besides just kind of fitting the contour of your foot, is how high the heel is. So a long time ago, it was very well accepted to have a high heel up. UPS man's coming up my road and my dogs are going to lose their mind. And I can't mute myself, so you're going to get to have some fun with that. Anyway, it's great it's recorded. So what you do with your heel, maybe 20 years ago is we thought, oh, we want a high heel. Like this is when Nike Air first came out and they're like, let's get the heel up and put tons of cushioning in it. But then, you know, we all bought those shoes and they needed to sell something else. So they're like, no, it needs to be barefoot. And we need to have like no heel, no drop. You should walk in nothing. And that caused another set of problems. And so now they're like, well, you can choose. You can have a high heel or you can have no heel. And what I have found is as I get older, I actually need a little bit more heel lift than I did before, right? So the zero drop barefoot shoes actually bug my heels and my Achilles tendon quite a bit. Whereas they didn't when I was 30, but I'm not 30 anymore and I need a little bit. So that's just a variable that I'd encourage you to play with and not just necessarily read an article and say, oh, they said this is the next greatest thing, because over the last really 40 years, they've changed this idea, the biomechanists and the shoe designers, of what type of heel drop you need. And now you need the heel drop that doesn't screw up your feet. And that seems to change with every decade of aging. So Susan's simple question, best walking shoes, is there is none. There's the one that works best for you. And then I'd encourage you to hoard them and buy 5 pairs, because they'll change them and they will go away. And then you will have a very bad day when you realize they've ruined your shoes, which does always happen. Do torn tendons? So Linda's asking about other tendons in the foot and the ankle. Do they ever heal? So it's usually the ligaments that we're talking about. And if they're partially torn, the answer is yes. They often do heal. If they're fully torn, the answer is no. They never heal unless there's surgery. So partial tears do heal. Same thing with tendons. Totally torn, almost never. Like there's a few cases, but if it's completely ruptured, so it's gone. But if it's kind of hanging on, you know, there's some connection there, that can regenerate. So complete tears are really different than partial tears. And if you have a torn tendon, that's always a great thing to ask your doctor is it partially torn or is it completely torn? And, you know, what are the implications for having something completely torn? You know, I have a completely ruptured ligament in my knee and a completely ruptured ligament in my ankle on opposite sides of my body. And, you know, for a long time, I didn't think it mattered. And now as I'm getting a little older, I'm like, oh, yep, this bugs me a little bit, but it's probably going to give me a little bit more arthritis, but I'm really functional. So if you have a choice to get those things repaired, it's often interesting to consider it. And then Bonnie's asking about mild numbness in her feet, worse in the morning when she wakes up and she's healthy and doesn't have blood sugar issues. Okay, so numbness in your feet, guys, if it's not diabetes, like you've been screened for all of that, if it's on both sides, that's often indicative of something off in your spinal cord, and not necessarily something serious, but it can be like stenosis or just some like pinched nerve down along your spine if it's on both sides. If it's on one side, then it can also be coming off a spinal nerve root, but it can be more like sciatica. But then it's on one side. So if you picture your spinal cord, here we can use the coffee cup again. So here we'll get the logo out of the way. So if this is your spinal cord, if this is a vertebra, so right now this is a vertebra. If the problem is my whole vertebra is misaligned, so my vertebra is slipped forward or come back, then I'm going to have both sides. If the problem is the vertebra is tipped or twisted, then it's going to pull on one side, and that pulling on one side is going often to give you one-sided numbness. Okay, so it just kind of depends what sort of dysfunctional dance your spine is doing. But you can often get some help by going to whoever your practitioner of choice is to assess that. So PTs can be good, chiropractors can be good. Sometimes just sports medicine docs are really good at this too, but you know, have somebody look at your back and see if there's something going on in your back that would address your feet, because there's a great big nerve that goes right down there. And that's one of the signs is nerve foot numbness coming from your lumbar spine. It's your lower back. It's like L2 through the sacrum. Those are fun questions. You guys are good with the questions.
So Carolyn, I think Lynn Rosen asked, can you discuss rolling tennis balls for beneficial foot massage?
Oh, I missed that one. Yep, because it was after Bonnie's there. Yes, thank you. So rolling tennis balls for beneficial foot massage is great. Especially on the arch, and especially if the tennis balls are old and they have a lot of give to them. So I'm not really a fan of pushing on the foot in a way that would make it feel painful. Like a little bit of discomfort's okay, but it's really important to have it feel therapeutic. Now my favorite thing you guys, you have to be careful with this because so many things can go wrong, is to cut the tennis ball in half. So when you cut the tennis ball in half, it makes this dome, and that dome is so perfect for massaging up around the ball of the foot and the arch of the foot. You can just, you kind of do this with your foot up and down, and it's good stuff. But what can go wrong? So many things can go wrong because there's a knife and there's a tennis ball and there's trying to cut it in half. So this is where like all the disclaimers, I'm like, oh, Tammy, don't try this at home, but we know we will. Vices are good. Get a friend to do it, who has a great insurance policy. Bread knives can be okay, but it's not safe, right? It's not safe at all, but it does yield the most amazing foot tool. So if you have somebody who is adept with a knife and a tennis ball, have them cut them. I had a friend for a while who had one of those electric turkey carving, or it's just like a meat carving knife, right? And they sacrificed their old knife and just cut up all these tennis balls for me. This is maybe 10 years ago. And it was one of the greatest gifts anybody's ever given me, was this bag of all of these tennis balls cut up. And then I gave them to all my friends. And I think we're about out of them. So if you want to do a deed, if you're equipped with a good knife and you want to do a deed of service, you can cut up tennis balls for your friends. If I find myself with some free time, maybe that's something I'll do for my community service this summer, is cut us up tennis balls, but we wouldn't hold our breath. And it looks like we have a couple new messages. Looks like we have 3 minutes. Yeah, so Melissa's talking about her feet being cold and turning purple, and it is probably circulation. And so that's always a really good thing to go get checked out, Melissa, because there's often some peripheral, so peripheral means external circulation issues in the legs that can be, they can really make your life less fun, because it just means the oxygen's not moving through your legs. And if there's oxygen not moving through your legs, you can not feel as strong. So I would definitely get those checked out, because there's so many great treatments now that are non-invasive for it, that it's definitely worthy of bringing up to a doctor. And also, even if there's nothing seriously wrong, sometimes just getting those circulation issues addressed can make it more fun to be a human. And then, yes, perhaps we'll have someone cut a bunch of them and make them available for free to our group. Yes, perhaps we will. Wouldn't that be great? I think that would be a really good idea. Somebody who is very good with a knife and won't leave any fingers at all in the process.
Yeah, we'll just take away a little bit of business from the emergency room and
I know.
I'm
being so reckless right now, when I've spent vacation with teenagers. So I'm like, the filter, I'm like, oh, you guys, I'm going to say it and we're going to do it. And then I'm going to be on Facebook and somebody's going to be like, and then I cut off my finger and I'm going to feel so bad.
How about one more question from Janet and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so Janet's asking about treatments for circulation. So there's some pretty cool ones. So there's ranging from like naturopathic stuff. So like we'll talk about one end of the spectrum. So like they just did some really cool studies that show that beets, like the purple beets, have properties that vasodilate blood vessels. So there's nitric oxide in them. So, drinking beet juice can help with circulation. So that was like a fun recent finding just from the food realm. Now, if you need more than just a little bit of vasodilation is basically opening up your blood vessel for better circulation. There's medications now that have very few side effects. I mean, some have a lot, but there's more options now for also opening that up. So there's beets on the low end, but if you need something larger, you can do it that way. So you're looking at medications that help keep those vessels dilated. I also had a friend who did a really cool procedure that's helped her a ton, where she had just some damage in the veins. And so she was having poor circulation, and a vascular surgeon was able to go in there and repair the veins. And it was pretty cool. So, the recovery time was several weeks, but it just completely changed her ability to use her body. So there's some pharmaceutical stuff, there's some natural stuff, but then there's also this idea of vascular treatments and surgeries and procedures that can help repair. They're not necessarily clogged, but sometimes they're kind of like a varicose vein. Like sometimes things are just not quite right in there, and they just need to, it's almost like plumbing, right? It's like you're plumbing for your blood, and you just get a bad pipe. And if somebody can go in there and I don't know, it's not clogging. It's like basically putting in a new pipe. It's very effective though. So definitely worth a talk to the doctor though, and not to be scared that there's only one way to treat it. So
All right, Carolyn.
Oh, you're welcome,
I'm
Tammy.
just guessing that everybody that got to listen to you today loves you as much as I do because of your big brain. So
I
thank
have a
you
big
so
brain.
much for
Oh, you guys,
kicking
it's
off
so
our
fun.
series.
Oh, it's so
Everybody,
fun.
big round of applause.
And thanks for hanging out. And thanks for having me, Tammy.
All
Anytime.
right. Thanks
I
It was
so
love the
much.
great.
why, and I love I love everything about the why. So invite me back anytime you just need somebody to show how a foot works with a coffee cup, because
Will do.
with a coffee cup. All
Thank
right, I'm gonna
you.
head out. Bye bye, guys.
Bye.